What is Pearland Stories? There's a lot happening in Pearland, but information's siloed across individual channels hosted by the city, the chamber, the Economic Development Corporation, and it's really hard to go out and find information sometimes. You don't see it all over the place. I wanted to create a channel to be the central space, focused on sharing the main things happening and to elevate the voices of city leaders, business owners, and community voices who are showing up and making a difference in Pearland. This is Pearland Stories. Today, I'm here with Jeff Webb. He's the president of the Forever Parks Foundation of Pearland. That's the nonprofit partnering with the city of Pearland to lead a major campaign for Independence Park. First, before we get into the project, Jeff, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, what kinds of things you've done in your personal journey leading up to your role here at the Forever Parks Foundation?
Yeah, absolutely, Brant. Thanks for having me on. So happy to be here. My story started in Louisiana, where I grew up. Went to school there, and then eventually enrolled at Texas A&M. So I came to Texas when I was 17 years old. I've been here ever since. I worked in newspaper industry as a writer, editor, sports reporter for quite some time. And then I decided I wanted a different career, so I transitioned to corporate communications and marketing communications. I had about a 20-year career doing that and decided to take a bit of a career break. Some call it early retirement, some call it a little bit of a pause. But one of the things that has been great for me in my life is my family has been here in Pearland since 2007. My wife is a Pearland native. We moved here when my daughter was 3 years old, so she's now 22 and has lived basically her entire life that she can remember here in Pearland. And for the last several years, I've been volunteering with the Parks Department in various capacities, and that's been one of my passions, starting as a volunteer helping to organize parking at concerts in the park in May and June, then joining the Parks and Recreation Board, advisory board that works with the city and the Parks Department on various aspects of the parks function. And then I decided to make a transition and join the Forever Parks Foundation, which has now been about 5 years ago, and very soon thereafter took over as president. So I find that despite that being an all-volunteer board, an unpaid position, I probably spend about 20 to 25 hours a week working for the foundation and advocating for our various projects. But one of the things that we've been passionate about is just always giving back to the community, and it's a great way to do that here in Pearland.
So was there a moment or an experience that really shifted how you think about parks and public spaces?
I think from the very beginning, seeing that our parks facilities are almost like the modern town square. If you think about where do we gather as a community, where do we have those communal experiences, you think about when we have the free concerts in the park, or the celebration of freedom with the drone show, what used to be the fireworks show. We get about 19,000 people out for that event at Independence Park alone every year.
Wow.
The hometown Christmas parade, the hometown Christmas festival, all these types of events, it's really where we gather, without regard to your background or your politics or any of those things. It's where we really feel community. And from the very beginning, volunteering with the Parks Department, I think you kind of feel that. And the foundation itself was established almost 11 years ago in 2015. And it was designed to help cover the gap on funding where we see that we need some premier facilities and maybe there's not enough funding from bond elections or city budget or those types of things. And so when I became really passionate about it was when we learned about the Ed Thompson Inclusive Park, or what ended up becoming Ed Thompson Inclusive Park. And I think we've now seen the impact of that just in people's daily lives. So I think it's that sense of community and belonging that we drive with parks, and that's really what I've been most passionate about.
So tell me specifically about the works of the Forever Parks Foundation. What really do you do?
Well, our biggest aspect is fundraising. So we talk to folks about the different projects that the Parks Department has coming up. As a nonprofit, our mission is to create premier parks facilities and programs here in Pearland with the cooperation and guidance of the City and Parks Department. So our foundation sets its goals based on the park's master plan. That's to make sure that we're aligned. We don't want to go off and do fundraising for a project that doesn't fit in with that master plan. So we try to do advocacy, grant applications. We talk to businesses or individuals who may be interested in joining for sponsorships, naming rights agreements, these types of things, and helping to convene those conversations between the city, the Parks Department, and those potential donors, because it really takes a village. Our tax dollars do a lot for us, but they can't do quite everything. And so what we're trying to do is to help bring those private donors and convene those conversations so that we can cover the gap and help have the best possible facilities that we could possibly have.
That brings us to the Independence Park Project. For those who haven't heard of it, can you kind of describe that in your own words and tell me a little bit about how that fits into that vision? Sure.
If anyone has been to Independence Park in Pearland, and I hope folks listening to this podcast certainly have, I call it our crown jewel of a facility, and it's because of its size. It's more than 70 acres. It's in a fairly central location. I know as Pearland has expanded to the west in Shadow Creek Ranch, maybe that's less true than it was 20 years ago. But it has the most potential. It's a bit of a sleeping giant. We have the large concert stage there with the big hill. We have the basketball pavilion. We have tennis courts. We have a dog park. We have some parking. We're looking to get more. But we always knew that it could be much more than it is. And about 5 years ago, Independence Park underwent a renovation. It was phase one of a planned 3-phase renovation. We think of that as kind of our community's rec room or backyard, and we want to finish that out and make it the best that it could be. One of the things that I think Pearland has done quite well when you look at other communities in the greater Houston area is parks is not just about the money to put in equipment and facilities and installation. It's also about strategic planning for land. That's maybe not the sexiest topic that people ever want to think about, but I think we've seen other communities who've struggled with that. For example, Sure. I used to work in Sugar Land, and Sugar Land is a great city. It's very well managed, but also they struggle with having enough land to do development in Sugar Land, whether it's for housing, but also for parks and those types of things. The city has done an excellent job preserving and protecting the acreage that we have to potentially put in things in the future like bike trails or bike paths, or I know there's been discussions around a skate park combination, those types of things. We have a very, very active disc golf group, the Disc Golf Degenerates, that do meetups at Centennial Park every Thursday night. It's a hoot. If you've never been, you got to go. Disc golf is very cheap to play. Go buy yourself some discs and show up, and it's a great community. And they want to put in an 18-hole course, but all of that takes planning and it takes land and investment. Right. I think Independence Park offers us the opportunity to expand the amenities that we have. And so the Independence Park project, this is phase 2. This is a huge deal. This is going to transform the park. We're looking at putting in a 4 to 5 acre play space. We have a huge retention pond there that is covered by trees and it's not really usable. And so the intent is to put paddle boards and kayaks out there in an adaptive dock so that anyone can use it, right? Imagine if you had water recreation right in your own backyard at Independence Park. That's a huge deal.
Right.
So those are just a couple of the examples of the amenities that we want to add to Independence Park to really make it something that's more vital for the community.
This is described as an all-inclusive play space. So can you talk a little bit about accessibility? Because it's built around what I've heard is called universal design. And so how do you explain those ideas to somebody who doesn't live in that world?
It's a great question, and I think it's something that I'd invite everybody, when you go to any public space, look at it with a little bit of empathy, is kind of the way that I describe it. Imagine if you used a wheelchair. How would you get from point A to point B? If you had vision impairment, if you had hearing impairment, how would you experience that space as compared to the way that someone else might experience it who has those full faculties? Universal design and all-inclusive play is really about going above and beyond what the ADA requirements, the American Disabilities Act requirements are. And it's ensuring that people of all abilities can use all the elements in a facility without any special accommodations, with as little help as possible, right? Because we want to drive independence, and that really drives inclusion. So it's about using that mindset when you design things to accommodate sensory needs, physical needs, cognitive, social needs.
Give me some specific examples. What are some specific features to tell people how that might look?
I think when I have talked with individuals about our first playground and the planning that went into that, and then also their reaction to being able to use it, they'll say things to me like, the surface is amazing. If something has mulch, it's not inclusive. And that comes from someone whose daughter uses a motorized wheelchair, right? So if you have gone to a playground and you see a mulch surface, which is safe, kids, if they're going to run, they're going to fall down. You don't want them to do that on concrete. It's a low cost surface, right? But it won't accommodate a wheelchair, for example. So our first playground that we built at Shadow Creek Ranch Sports Complex has a special surface that, by the way, was half of the total cost of that playground. It's incredibly expensive to do things right. That is one example of how you make it inclusive, is ask yourself, if I was using a wheelchair, could I access all elements of this playground? Similarly, I'm a child of the 80s, right? I was born in 77. I remember growing up, it was like the Wild West, okay? You go and you get on a merry-go-round and you're just, saying a little prayer that your ankle doesn't get caught up under there and there's some, catastrophic sports injury that results. We have a little merry-go-round at Ed Thompson Inclusive Park that is a zero-level entry. So that means that it is flush with the surface. So if you're in a wheelchair, you can roll right onto that thing. And you can spin around with your friends. You can experience that together, but you're independent. You can go right on it. You don't even have to worry about it. We also have done things in the past at these other parks, like a music play area, so that there's more for those who, if they like to experience music, they have that. But also we have a sensory tunnel so that, some children, if they have autism or if they live with some developmental disability, they may need a quiet space to get away from it all. And so all of that is included in the thought and the programming. Another example is if someone has vision impairment, you can do things on a playground with touch feel exhibits on the wall, where if someone can't experience things with their eyes, they can feel and they can experience it that way. So it's that thoughtfulness that I think goes into it. It's the programming, not just the physical access. Yes, that's a huge part of it, but it's also being thoughtful about the programming that's in a playground to make sure that there's something for everyone. And oh, by the way, when you talk to folks that go out there, and I've talked to parents who are out there and, their children don't live with any disabilities, but they still say, hey, this has got stuff that no other playground has. This is like their favorite playground. And it's because there's so many different things that are there. So it really benefits everyone. Not only is it critically important for those who may have disabilities, but it's also fun add-ons for people who maybe it's not critical to them, but they get to experience that nonetheless.
I appreciate the level of awareness and care that you've taken, clearly intentionally, to better understand that. Can you talk about like what that looks like at Ed Thompson Park and what some of the things you've seen? I've heard you tell some stories in the past about like how kids could come and just like play together and there weren't any barriers. Can you explain and describe some of that?
Sure, yeah. And I think the Ed Thompson Inclusive Park story probably starts almost with the beginning of the foundation, just to maybe take you through that story. Mayor Kevin Cole, who has been mayor of Pearland for quite some time, he has a nephew, Evan, who uses a wheelchair. And Evan had asked him before, hey, when we go to playgrounds, I can't get on the equipment with the other kids. Can we create something that would be inclusive for everybody? So he has been a huge champion of this from the very beginning. He's been hand in glove involved with advocating for the foundation itself. In fact, he's been the sponsor of our charity golf tournament for 5 years running now. And really the inception of the foundation, we always thought, okay, that's going to be one of our long-term goals. We have to walk before we can run. The initial budget for the playground was maybe $750,000, and COVID and cost escalation and inflation and all the supply chain disruptions changed that fairly quickly. And I think the final fundraising amount for the playground was $1.37 million. So it was not inexpensive. We had a lot of generous donors who certainly helped us out on that. But we knew that we would have a Miracle League field in Pearland, and what better way to supplement those who participate in the Miracle League than to have an inclusive playground right next door? So we had this piece of land that was fairly small, but it was right next to the Miracle League at Shadow Creek Ranch. And so that's where we began. We partnered with an organization called Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration. It's a nonprofit based out in California. And that's what they do. They have built about 70 inclusive playgrounds, and they were our advisor. That's where we learned. And that's been one of the benefits of this is as you go on this journey and you do fundraising and you acknowledge what you don't know, you learn so much about, advocating for people living with disabilities. And so the way that it manifested itself in Ed Thompson Playground are some of the elements that I mentioned. We have something called a We Go swing, which is basically a platform swing, and we have a ramp that leads up to all of the equipment so that if you're using a wheelchair, you can roll up to this platform, lock into place, and you can swing. And it's important for kids to learn how to play together and to say, you can involve your friends regardless of their abilities. Now you guys can play together on the same equipment. But one of the things, Brant, that I never realized, even though logically if you think it through, you're like, well, yes, of course. But in terms of the use case, you don't think about the parent or the grandparent that is in a wheelchair who goes out there to play and they tell you, this is the first time I've ever been able to swing with my daughter or with my grandson. And it's really involving not only the children, but involving the parents. And really that's what inclusion is all about. So we have all of those elements at Ed Thompson Inclusive Park, and that's what we're trying to bring to Independence as well.
And you have a lot of like themed zones with some interesting names that are I think they're designated for different types of inclusivity, if I understand it correctly. So they have names like Hillside Habitat, Fruit Pile, Farmers Village, Dry Creek Exploration, and Play Lawns. Can you tell me a little bit about some of those and And what might a child or their caregiver experience in that space?
Absolutely. So one of the fun things that you get to do when you're involved in a project like this is the architect will come up with some ideas as part of what we call the conceptual design phase. So conceptual design is something that we did last year, and it's basically, hey, what would pie in the sky awesome look like? And what can we bring to Independence Park, right? So our partner, TBG Architects, who's been working with the foundation in the city on this project, came up with these conceptual designs of different play areas, knowing what kind of amenities we wanted at the park. So, hey, we're Pearland, right? We have pears hidden in the design of Ed Thompson Inclusive Park, so why not have a fruit pile with soft hills and different fruits? Yes, of course, pears, but also, apples and oranges and all of that. So instead of just having a structure for kids to climb on, let's make it themed, right? Similarly, when we have something like a little hut village, it has these little rooms with, open door huts where kids can just use their imagination. They can play hide and go seek. They can go run from one area to another. And the intent is for all of these lands to be kind of contiguous. So if you have a 4.5 acre play space, you go from one area to the next with a dry creek bed kind of running through it so that it has some common themes. We're working to include also an adaptive splash pad there, which, in fact, Southdown Park has the splash pad there has been closed for some time. It's having an opening event at the beginning of April. I know folks are really excited to get that open back up. We have a splash pad at Centennial Park. Hey, those are really popular for the summer, and that's been one of the things that people have requested. So we want to bring that as well. And we actually have some potential sponsors that we're talking to. Gringos has recently made a commitment to the project, and we're excited to work with them on what that looks like. We're talking with HEB about potentially theming some things along with a land that they would like. So if anyone would like to see more information about this, by the way, you can go to foreverparksfoundation.org, and we have all of the plans and the brochures and the renderings that are on our website. So I'd encourage people to go check that out. But, it's having those different themed lands that people can come and experience. And one other thing, people have said, well, when we say an adaptive splash pad, what exactly does that mean? And Carrie Capers, who's the director of Parks and Rec, she does a great job of kind of articulating that, right? If you've ever been to a splash pad, there can be like the big bucket that fills up and dumps over and splashes on everyone, or you can have some pretty intense jets. There's even some inclusive design around splash pads that you can do where on the outside, on the outskirts of the space, you could have just puddles where if there's a child maybe that it's sensory overload, if they go and just get completely deluged by water, they can go and put their feet in there at first. Or to have like a fine mist area where, someone in a wheelchair could roll up and just get kind of sprayed and cooled down or whatever, so that you don't have to get right in the thick of things until you're ready or until you want to. So there's even inclusive and adaptive design that goes into those types of elements that maybe folks wouldn't think about from the outside looking in.
So with all of these pieces, what have you heard from people who've come and visited those kinds of spaces before? I understand you had some numbers around like tons of people from lots of different places coming to visit Ed Thompson and using that as kind of a model. What have they kind of talked about? Like, what have you heard from other people?
I think every time I've gone out to Ed Thompson Inclusive Park, which again was our first inclusive playground that we opened in April of 2023, I believe. I've had folks say, this is our favorite playground. I often encounter people who are from the greater Houston area who come down to visit that playground. In fact, we have partnered with Tier Memorial Herman was one of our advisors on the first playground, and they do a lot of specialized rehabilitation. And so they even recommend that some of their clients who are rehabbing go there to get active because they can do it there without any limitations. And so that's been great to hear. But you're right. In the first 2 years, Ed Thompson Inclusive Park, we had more than 70,000 visitors. And people say, well, how do you know that? And it's like, well, we use, when I say we, of course, I mean the Parks Department. They have this tool. It's called Placer. And so they can kind of detect pings off of cell phones to see what general area people are at. So we can see that there are that many people who are coming out to that space and using it. And it's not just Pearland. I mean, yes, of course, there's a ton of people from Pearland who use it. But we've seen people from 260 zip codes and I think 29 different states who have been out there. I actually ran into a family they were visiting their family in Fresno, okay, just adjacent to Pearland, and they had come to that playground because, someone that they had met with the family said, oh yeah, there's a great playground out here. And they said, we don't have anything like this at home. I believe they were from Missouri. And that was just great to see. It makes you feel a little pride in your community that we have something that I think other people haven't seen before. So I think every time I go by, there's families there. We have a partnership with a group called ALIS Promise. It's a youth leadership group that's chaired or run by Carol Lee, who's been a great partner to the foundation. And they do something called a monthly My Play Club. And so that is an event that they do once a month, usually on a Saturday or Sunday, where they do drumming exhibitions and they do face painting and they have games that they play with the kids. And it's usually for 2 hours, and they'll actually get active with the kids out on the playground. And it's to help create that atmosphere of inclusive play. And that has really helped, I think, keep the playground vital for people as well.
What about personal stories? I'm sure you've heard from kids, from families who've told you how much this means to them.
Yeah. We had a mom of a child who actually spoke at the opening of Ed Thompson Inclusive Park, and it was fairly emotional. It's really the only playground within driving distance that her daughter can play on because of the way her wheelchair, what the requirements are. And those are the types of things that remind you why you do what you do. I mentioned the story earlier about talking to a dad who was swinging with his daughter. And it's like, well, this is the first time that we've been able to do that. And I think it's those things that you see that really change your viewpoint on the importance of the work that you're doing. That's the other thing for people who are interested in how they get involved. It's like, well, your dollars are going directly to this playground. That is the main goal of what we have going on for the foundation. And so just to know that we're a part of that is pretty meaningful to change lives in Pearland for sure.
More broadly, why are parks so critical for the community's health and quality of life? Why are they important? Why is this a good investment by the community? Why should people help out?
I think a lot about what life is like as compared to 30 or 40 years ago. I recently visited my folks. They live in Louisiana. I try to visit them about once a month. We talk a lot about what it was like for them when they were, young adults and starting a family, and the relative cost of things and what the economy was like and those types of things, and how life has evolved and what they face now. And I often joke with them, I'm like, well, in a world where everybody wants you to put yourself on a subscription for something. That's we deal with a lot of stress in life. We deal with a lot of costs in life. So I think a lot about what are the free things that we get to do? How do we think about people who are maybe on limited incomes or retirees who are on a retirement pension? Not just, the folks who are in sort of like the heyday of their career, but how can we make things more economically inclusive for people? And parks is a huge part of that, right? It doesn't cost me any dollars to go to ride a bike on the trail or to go enjoy the concert at the concert in the park in May and June, or to go take a child and play on the playground for an hour and a half, pack a picnic lunch. I think these are public goods, and it's critically important that we give people the opportunity to exercise and commune with nature and to have that feeling of community and fellowship and provide that as low a cost as possible, right? To try to remove those barriers. I think that's when you're in a community that cares. So that's one aspect. And I think, if we're going to have these things, everyone should be able to use it. And that's really been our philosophy and what we're trying to do with the foundation. Not only are we working on the Independence Park project, but we also have a financial assistance program. We make a donation every year to the Parks Department to ensure that they don't turn away families for, lack of funding for summer camps and programs like that, right? We want every seat filled and for those who maybe are more economically challenged, helping to offset those costs so that they still have the opportunity to participate in those day camps and various other nature programs. And so I think we always need to remember why those things are important to quality of life in Pearland. We want this to be an inclusive community for sure.
Oh, I appreciate that. That really resonates with me because I grew up in rural East Texas. And so a lot of these zones sound like the spaces that I grew up in where, we didn't have parks. We didn't have, I was pretty poor and we didn't, have access to go to camps and go do those kinds of things. We went fishing. We went out and swam in the river. We went,
Right.
And played in spaces that sound a lot like you're trying to rebuild here. And that's one of the things with so many people and so much area, raising my children in this environment. They're in 8th and 9th grade now, so they are beyond that. But all of the spaces around Pearland that were available to them, we have so many fond memories of just, taking them out and interacting and engaging in those spaces. So I appreciate what you're doing from that perspective because, my childhood was different from theirs, but it's important to give them some place where they can interact and engage in those kinds of spaces. That brings me to like the role of like parks and community life and the importance of that and the value for what you guys are doing. So can you talk a little bit more about like the numbers and the projected impact and what that looks like for the community in that context?
Yeah. I think it's hard to say what the upper limit is of the number of people who could be impacted by these types of things. But just looking at the numbers today, let's look at Independence Park itself. I think I may have mentioned earlier that, we see as many as 19,000 people who come in for Celebration of Freedom, which is our largest single event. We see thousands of people for each concert in the park. You'll see 9,000 or 10,000 for the hometown Christmas festival. But on an average day, if you've ever gone out there and seen the number of people playing basketball at the pavilion, those types of things, we're growing, and we know that our numbers are going to grow. Today, we're seeing more than 300,000 visitors a year to Independence Park itself. And for those larger events, there's a line 15 deep just to get on a swing at the playground. So we know that we'll see thousands of children who are of the age to take advantage of the playground. And today it's like ants crawling over a hill, the number of kids who are trying to get on the play equipment there. So we know, first of all, that for those larger events, 100% the new play space when it opens will be packed to the gills for those events. But, I don't think it would be out of bounds to say that we would expect to see, 400 to 500,000 visitors to Independence Park by the time the new construction opens. So, that's 500,000 people who will get to experience all the amenities of Independence Park once we have this phase 2 completed. And that's a huge impact. And I suppose you could extrapolate the number of people when you talk about the largest event. I don't think it would be out of sight to say it would be 25,000 people could be there for the celebration of freedom and the drone show and everything else. I mean, we already have people standing in the parking lots who didn't go all the way to the park, but they can still see the drone show or the fireworks that we've done in the past. So that's a huge number of people who are impacted by the park.
You have a pretty big campaign coming up, and just talking about those numbers, talking about the number of people impacted, this is a big project. So let's talk about the dollars and your fundraising goals for the whole project, and where you are in fundraising and what your needs are moving forward.
When the foundation started in 2015, I want to say the largest project that was done in the foundation was maybe like $10,000 or $15,000 in the first year, right? When we set the goal for Ed Thompson Inclusive Park, our original goal was less than $1 million. It eventually was almost $1.4 million because of inflation and supply chain challenges. When we did the analysis of the Independence Park project, we knew that we were going to have $700,000 from the approved bond that would go towards the play space. And then we said, okay, what would awesome look like if we built a budget for that? And the example that I give is my wife and I, a few years after we got married, we were working on building our first house. We were living in Victoria, Texas. And you go and you look at the floor plans and you say, okay, we want that one. And then you start putting together your wish list of amenities down to how many electrical outlets do we want in the living room, right? If anyone's ever been through a home building process, you know what that's like. And then they say, here's how much that's going to cost. And then you say, wow, maybe we don't need that many electrical outlets. Yeah, maybe we could put up our own fence. Maybe we can sod our own yard. You start to make these decisions and concessions. And so when we came out of the process to say, what does great look like? We came out with a price tag of about $5 million. We said, okay, can we do it? We've met the challenge every time before. We know we have some awesome partners out there who are primed to, give again. They said, hey, we're behind you. We believe in this. We're ready to do it again. We knew that we had fundraising events built in, things like Mayor Kevin Cole's charity golf tournament that he chairs for us. So we said, let's do it. Let's shoot for $5 million as the goal for this. Now, where are we? I think the last time that I saw you was at the Pearland Rotary Club meeting, which was a few weeks ago. And at that time, we were at the halfway mark. We had raised just shy of $2.5 million of the $5 million. In the last month, we have had additional commitments that have come through with some companies who are looking at naming rights and sponsorship deals, as well as some grant opportunities. We feel that we're now $1 million closer to the goal. So we would probably put ourselves at about 3.5 out of the $5 million. So we're pursuing various grant opportunities. We have some additional organizations who are going to commit funds, and it's just a question of where their comfort level is. But our goal is to try to hit that mark in terms of commitment by August or September of this year. Now, people may say, well, Jeff, like, why, if you're not going to even break ground until potentially the end of 2017 and then start construction in 2018, why do you need to know in Q3 of 26 whether or not you've got the money committed? Well, the reason is because we can't go commit to build something and then not, be $1 million short when it comes time to pay the bills. So we have to know, what are we going to build for? So bringing it back to that house analogy, it may take these days, I'm sure, at least a year to build a house. At least I have an aunt and uncle who are building a house, and it feels like it's taken that long for them. You have to make a decision at some point, like, what is my budget? And hope isn't going to pay the bills. So we just need to make sure we have the commitment in place. So we're doing a process in Q4 of this year called detailed design, which is basically taking that conceptual design that we did last year and then making it real, taking it from like artist renderings on a page to actually talking about what equipment are we going to order and what color is that wall going to be and what company logo will be on the bucket that dumps the water on the splash pad.
Right.
So that is the process that we'll be undertaking in Q4, and that's why we need to have sort of that idea, understanding that we have a lot of families and individual donors who are very excited about giving. So at our last playground, anyone who donated $500 and up, you got your name on the wall, on the concrete monument that's out there. Right. I took a friend to go visit Ed Thompson Inclusive Park, and hey, look, I'm not shy. I said, hey, look, there it is. There's my name and my wife's name and my daughter's name, because we wrote a check to help pay for this. And there's a sense of pride that comes from that, right? You save your money, you decide to give to a good cause, and we want to recognize people for doing that. And so, that's a source of funding that we know will also come in that will help supplement everything. And so we know that we have to close a lot of these agreements and kind of get people on board to help us reach that goal by the end of the year.
And you talked about timeline a little bit. So tell me, what does it look like from today through construction and opening?
We'll go through the detailed design in Q4. Then we will break ground probably by the end of 27. And break ground basically means the ceremonial shovel in the dirt, essentially. I think construction will really begin in earnest in 28. And then it's just a question of, will weather cooperate, and, will there be any supply chain disruptions and those types of things. But I think you will see that phase 2 construction should be complete by 29. So it sounds like a long way off. I think we know it's not. Blink and it'll be here. Right. So, really you think about 2.5 years from today, we could be doing that. And certainly some of the amenities at the park will also depend on how close to the funding goal do we get. So, for example, if someone goes out and they look at the PDF that we have for sponsors, and they see some elements on that like pickleball courts, it's like, well, will we have pickleball courts? Well, we might. If we hit our fundraising target, we could absolutely have pickleball courts. If we fall short of the $5 million goal, then some elements like that might get pushed into phase 3. I don't want to make that future Jeff's problem or future foundation's problem. It would be great to have that solved now. So that's why we're working so hard on grant applications and discussions with sponsors, is because we don't want to push these things to phase 3. We're we're selfish. We want them now. We want them now for Pearland so that we can enjoy them. So I think by 29, we will have kids playing on the new playground in Independence Park, and that is the goal for sure.
That's awesome. So what are some of the most meaningful ways people can help? You mentioned sponsorships and naming opportunities. Are there specific ones you want to talk about? Are there specific needs? Or are there specific things that people can do?
I would say for folks who are listening to this podcast who are like, man, I like this idea. I want to help make it happen. Tell me step one. I would say step one is tell people about the project. I have been doing a bit of a road show, and this is where I need to pause for a second and recognize somebody who's very important to the foundation and to Pearland, whether you know it or not. That's Kelly Moody, who now works for the Parks and Rec Department, but was president of the foundation. She was my predecessor, and I joke that she did such an awesome job advocating for the Parks Department that they hired her on full time. They're like, awesome. Hey, you're no more volunteering for you. We want all of your time. And so she sits on our board as a result of her role. But she and I talk multiple times every week about fundraising and grants and different programs and just the overall process. And so, in fact, I've got a call with her in a couple hours after we're recording this. And so she has really been the engine behind a lot of what you see as far as the materials that we've collaborated on and all of that. And I wanted to give her a special shout out because we talk often about how can people help? What is the next step? Well, getting the word out is job one. So if anyone out there knows of a business or an organization or individual contributors who would like to be a part of it, point them to this podcast, point them to our website. Have them call me personally. I would love to talk to them. We would love to bring the road show to your town, so to speak, and share the story about what the opportunities are. I think also an individual can help by checking out the donation and sponsorship opportunities themselves. I mentioned that, we take private donations. I recently, 2 days ago, we received a $1,000 check from a family who said, hey, we heard about this project. We saw the posts on Facebook on the foundation page. We want to be a part of it. And they sent a check. It's a huge deal. I mean, if we had 100 people do that, imagine the impact of that. So I think those are the big things. If anyone knows of grant opportunities or individuals we should be talking to from different businesses, we're all over it. So those are a few ways that folks can help for sure.
So where can people go to learn more? Where can people contact you? What's your website address?
Sure. Our website is foreverparksfoundation.org. Probably within about 2 months, we're going to have a new website that we're getting ready to launch. Just a little fancier, nothing too big, but that has a page that's dedicated to the Independence Park project. You can find artist renderings. You can find, what those different play areas will look like. Probably a 12-page PDF, and it also has sponsorship levels. So if folks are interested about making a commitment, we even have a pledge card on there that if you want to make a commitment, you could fill that out. You could send it to our email. You can email us at foreverparksfoundation@gmail.com. That is our email address. And then definitely check our Facebook page, Forever Parks Foundation of Pearland. We're posting, information about different events that we have coming up. Obviously the golf tournament is coming up April 20th. Would love for people to participate in that if they haven't already. We just have all kinds of different event opportunities where you can engage with us. And if you have ever been to a parks event, if you've been to a concert in the park, if you've been to the Celebration of Freedom, you've probably seen my ugly mug out there manning the table or making a fool of himself on stage for a couple of minutes telling you about all kinds of things that are going on for the foundation. So come and talk to me. Would love to have a chat with you about the project and about if you want to join and be a part of it.
Well, Jeff, thank you for coming on today. Thank you for your leadership through all of this. I'm excited to see how this turns out. I love what you're doing, and I love hearing about this, and I'm sure they are as well. If you like, share, and subscribe, help get the word out about this, and tell everybody you can about this. Thank you so much for your time.